What's up, everybody, and welcome to a new episode of Anthony KT Wrestling. Thank you for joining me. Welcome, and thank you for coming to my AKT Publishing channel and checking out this episode of Anthony KT Wrestling, as well as many other episodes that I have posted for Anthony KT Wrestling, as well as other videos that I've left on this channel. So, thank you. So, the seed of AEW starts with a question. Dave Meltzer started with a question to Dave Meltzer in May of 2017 when he was asked by a fan on Twitter if Ring of Honor would sell 10,000 tickets. Dave Meltzer responded to that question by saying, "Not anytime soon." Cody Rhodes sees this response that Dave Meltzer gave to a fan and responded back by saying, "I'll take that bet. I'll take that bet." From there, it's game on. The seed is planted for this idea for a pro wrestling show, the biggest independent show ever. Which was the tagline of this show that was going to be called All In, which happened on May 1st of 2019, which was a show that was promoted by Cody Rhodes and the Young Bucks, Nick and Matt Jackson. After the success from All In, months later, the tickets that they were able to sell were more than 10,000 tickets. The exact number of tickets that they were able to sell was 11,263 total tickets sold, which they were able to make Dave Meltzer eat his words and saying that not anytime soon of Ring of Honor being to sell 10,000 tickets. So, moving forward, taking what was that seed of All In, of an independent show, it gets planted for something new, something alternative, which is why so many tickets were able to sell and why it did so well on pay-per-view. It was something new. In the world of wrestling, it was something new, something alternative from what was already out. And with Cody Rhodes, the Young Bucks, and the backing of a billionaire and the owner of the Jacksonville Jaguars and his son, Tony Khan, they found that alternative, and it became All Elite Wrestling, or AEW, as of January 1st of 2019. 9 months later, on October 2nd, 2019, the first episode of AEW Dynamite aired on TNT. But let's go back a little bit before Dynamite. The first introduction to AEW on television was on pay-per-view on May 25th of 2019 with Double or Nothing. It was on that night where we saw the debut of the former WWE wrestler and former member of the Shield, Dean Ambrose, now Jon Moxley, make his debut. It was also on that same night that Bret the Hitman Hart unveiled the AEW World Heavyweight Championship. On the second pay-per-view came in August, on August 31st in 2019, with All Out, as Chris Jericho was able to defeat Hangman Adam Page to become the inaugural AEW World Champion. AEW, after two successful pay-per-views and the debut of Dynamite, had quickly become a successful alternative to WWE on television. At the time, AEW and NXT both were airing on the same night and time, and to fans, this was being dubbed as the Monday Night Wars, I want to say tribute. I don't know if it really was a tribute, but more of a playoff to what was the Monday Night Wars between Monday Night Raw and WCW Nitro, when they both aired on Monday nights at the same time. But honestly, during that time, NXT was not really competition to AEW. As someone who can be very biased when it comes to WWE, and someone who is a fan of WWE, I can honestly say that AEW, when you have fans have two wrestling shows on at the same time, you do your best to try to get more fans, more viewers to watch your show over the other show. When you stack up NXT versus AEW Dynamite, granted, two things about NXT. NXT is and forever will be known as a third brand. Granted, Triple H was calling that developmental. In a way, it is developmental, but I believe more in the fact that the Performance Center is developmental, and NXT is its own brand. When you take the pro wrestlers that you have signed, these athletes that you have signed, and you run them through everything in the Performance Center, and you feel when they're ready to be on TV, then they have crossed over from developmental onto the brand of NXT, the third brand. They're ready for TV. Still, they call it developmental, but nonetheless, when you take NXT versus this something new over here, AEW Dynamite, and you have shows and you have these athletes, these pro wrestlers who have been featured on New Japan Pro Wrestling and on Ring of Honor, and now they're on this show. And for a lot of these pro wrestlers that are on AEW, a lot of fans haven't had the opportunity to actually see them in action. So this would be like the first time, and this was the first time a lot of people, granted, they knew who the Young Bucks were, and who Cody Rhodes was, and who Hangman Adam Page were, and who Kenny Omega was. But this was the first time for a lot of people who were actually able to see the Young Bucks in action, or Kenny Omega in action, or a Hangman Adam Page in action. It was the first time to see a lot of these pro wrestlers get noticed on such a big television network that is TNT. So it was a very big deal, and that did very well for fans and viewers when you look at the ratings, because AEW was winning the so-called Wednesday Night War. So much so that NXT ended up moving from Wednesday nights to Tuesday nights. Personally, I like having NXT on Tuesday nights, mostly because I can go from Raw on Monday to NXT on Tuesday to AEW on Wednesday. Nice little break on Thursday, and then go right to it on Friday, with SmackDown, with the occasional PLE on the weekend. Anyway, so moving forward, we move into 2020. In March of 2020, as COVID was spreading across the nation, all sports started to cancel and postpone, with the uncertainty of if or when they would come back. Pro wrestling companies such as WWE and AEW were on that chopping block of whether or not they would able to come back. And COVID at the time was really bad for AEW, because this AEW was a freshly new company at the time. They haven't even been around for a year yet. They haven't really been on TV for a year yet. I mean, as a company, they've been around for a year, because they became a company on January 1st of 2019. But when you get into March of 2020, even though they've been a company for a year, they haven't really been on television for that long. So wondering what was going to happen, not only with WWE, but more so with AEW, because they were still so fresh and so new, especially on television, it was very uncertain. But like WWE, AEW was able to push through, and they were, instead of traveling, they could obviously, they, for obvious reasons during COVID, they could not travel. So instead of traveling, they were able to go. They were able to find a place where they could just do all their shows and all their upcoming pay-per-views. It was in the Jacksonville Jaguar Arena, Daly's place, and on March 18th of 2020, AEW aired without fans for the first time. It was also for the first time, but they continued to move forward. During COVID, like WWE, AEW continued to push forward with episodes of Dynamite and their pay-per-views. We get into 2021, and AEW was able to return to touring and bringing back fans, and it was great to have the fans back. It was electric. Everyone was excited to get back to some kind of normalcy as we entered into 2021. And there were some things that happened in 2021, some big things, I would say, that happened in 2021. The first thing is the owner of AEW, Tony Khan, purchased Ring of Honor. 2021 was also the year that CM Punk returned to pro wrestling when he signed with AEW in August of 2021. AEW also debuted its second weekly show in Rampage on TNT. And then we move ahead to 2 years later. And 2 years later, in 2020, in 2020, 2 years later, in 2023, AEW debuts its third weekly show on TNT Collision. So in January of 2022 on Dynamite, in January of 2022, AEW Dynamite moves from TNT to TBS. The move from TNT to TBS mostly had to do with sports, with basketball and hockey. Moving Dynamite over to TBS ensured that when sports happened on a Wednesday, when there was a hockey game or a basketball game on a Wednesday, it would ensure that AEW Dynamite would not be interrupted by these sports or force AEW to do a taping to air it earlier or later or at a later time. So this really worked out for everybody in that case. 2022 was also the year that Cody Rhodes left AEW in February of 2022. As it stated publicly that he left in 2022 after failing to negotiate a new contract. I'm sure there are multiple unsaid reasons why, and all of them have to do probably between management and backstage about why Cody Rhodes left AEW in February of 2022. Contract, unable to negotiate a contract. Yes, that is definitely one of the reasons. But there are so many unsaid reasons that I'm sure we'll probably really never know to why Cody Rhodes left AEW. It's like that is something between him and Tony Khan, and something that we must respect. That is private. But 2 months later, it worked. For us as pro wrestling fans, especially for us who are longtime card-carrying members of the WWE Universe, it worked out for us in our favor because 2 months later, at WrestleMania 38, Cody Rhodes makes his return to WWE as he is the surprise opponent that Vince McMahon picked out to face Seth Rollins, which they had a barn burner of a match. Now, Which also, side note, WrestleMania 38 is also the same WrestleMania in which it was Kevin Owens versus returning to the ring, WWE Hall of Famer and legend, multiple time WWE champion, Intercontinental champion, Stone Cold Steve Austin, Austin 316. And yes, that was a great match as well. Loved it. But that was just a little side note to that. Let's keep moving forward. In September of 2022, after a press conference for what was a successful show in All In, there was a altercation between CM Punk, Kenny Omega, and the Young Bucks, and from what is been reported publicly about it, CM Punk accused the Kenny Omega and the Young Bucks of leaking false information to the media. Words were said that we can imagine what were said from Punk to Kenny Omega to the Young Bucks. But after things got very heated, it led to CM Punk, Kenny Omega, and the Young Bucks fighting backstage. Now, it has been said also that Punk was the first to throw the punch, but nonetheless, after this backstage fight happened, there were consequences to this backstage fight. The first thing was CM Punk had to vacate the AEW World Heavyweight Championship, and Kenny Omega and the Young Bucks, known as the Elite, they had to drop their AEW Trio Tag Team Championships, as CM Punk with Kenny Omega and the Young Bucks were getting suspended. Now, at the time, it was certain that Kenny Omega and the Young Bucks were coming back, which is a matter of when. But it was uncertain whether or not, at that time, if CM Punk was going to come back. You skip ahead about a year later, after the controversy and all that stuff, after cooler heads, calmer heads prevailed, CM Punk in June of 2023, in an interview on ESPN, has said that he has regretted how he handled that situation. Some remorse in that. So that was it's always a good thing to see. But eventually, CM Punk and Kenny Omega and the Young Bucks all came back to AEW, and having a bit of a fresh start in that. And then in June of 2023, AEW released, which was really exciting. Within AEW, this was pretty exciting, that in June of 2023, AEW released their first video game called AEW Fight Forever. It took years. I mean, a game usually can take years to develop and get together and make sure everything is right. It was a game that took so long that at times there were whispers and wonderings if this video game was ever going to be released. But it was, and it did fairly well. As a video game, it did fairly well, and people had their fun with it. I mean, people were comparing this game to the 2K series of WWE, and there's really no comparison to either game, because WWE 2K, honestly, I prefer that game over this game. But I feel like AEW, the AEW Fight Forever game was not considered like one of the serious kind of games like WWE 2K is. It was more like, it's like a cartoon, have fun, all types of crazy kind of game, which is never a bad thing. It's a good thing. So it fits more in the let's have fun kind of game. There's no real storylines. There's nothing we're really telling as far as this game goes. We put this game out. We want people to have fun with it, with some of your favorite pro wrestlers in the game. There you go. Awesome. Moving through 2023, excuse me, there was 2 months later after that game came out, there was a second, before I get to the second altercation, and 2 months later in AEW headed to London at Wembley Stadium for All In. And I remember how people were comparing this Wembley event to WWE's SummerSlam Wembley event. And it's very unfair to compare WWE SummerSlam, an event that took place in the early 90s in Wembley Stadium and haven't returned since, to something in this current century being Wembley. And obviously, I felt like it felt more obvious that there were going to be more fans at one event than at this event because of, for one thing, the decade and century it took place in versus the decade and century All In is taking place in. So it felt very unfair to combine the two. Although it would be cool to, and I feel like it will happen eventually, WWE returning when they go to London, having a event in Wembley Stadium. And then I feel like it's more fair that if you take a recent WWE event in Wembley Stadium and put it up against a recent AEW event like All In Wembley Stadium, then you can match the two. And then if you want to see who did better, did better. But these days in pro wrestling, it's not fair. It's more fun to just sit back and enjoy the wrestling you have today, because there's so much wrestling on television to watch than there was when I was growing up through the late 80s into the 90s. Anyway, we get to All In in 2023. It was August of 2023. We get to All In, and there is a second altercation between, and this time it's once again it's backstage, but this time it's between Jack Perry and CM Punk. This altercation led to CM Punk getting fired from AEW, and it led to Perry getting suspended indefinitely. Honestly, for CM Punk, it worked out for him because like 3 months later, he ended up returning at the end of War Games at Survivor Series to WWE. And then for Jack Perry, it took Jack Perry a little bit of time to come back. About 8 months. It took about 8 months after his altercation with CM Punk for him to come back, and that was in April of 2024. And since then, he has been on a roll. This new character he has done, the Scapegoat, has really worked out for him, and his time as the TNT champion has really, really been good for him. And it did end for him at Full Gear. He did lose, but I feel like a rematch for him is coming for that TNT championship. And then in October of 2024, when people were still wondering what was going to happen with TV rights and plans for AEW with Warner Brothers Discovery made the announcement of a multi-year contract extension, and to maintain AEW's existing programs on TBS and TNT, also adding digital rights, as they'll be able to stream their weekly television shows like Dynamite and Collision on Max, and also being able to show their pay-per-views like something like a Full Gear, like World's End, like Revolution, will be able to show on Max. But at least for me it is, the disappointing side of it is that it won't be free to watch on Max. If you pay whatever your price is that you pay for an AEW pay-per-view on an AEW pay-per-view, whatever that price is, if you want to watch it on Max, You'll be able to pay. You'll still have to pay for it, but you'll get a discounted price when you pay for it on Max. I don't know. I mean, I can honestly say I don't know what that discount price is, and I don't think we'll actually know what that discount price is until we get to 2025 and we see for ourselves exactly what that discount price is. I feel like this, and I discussed this in an earlier episode of Anthony KT Wrestling, that I feel like this is very unfair to people who already subscribe to Max. If you subscribe to Max, you're being, whatever you pay, whatever your price is that you pay for Max, you're being asked to add an additional price to whatever you want to pay, whatever you're going to pay to watch that AEW pay-per-view, which is completely unfair to the viewer. The fair thing to do, and I feel like I'm not the only one who feels this way, but the fair thing to do is that if you are a Max subscriber, the AEW pay-per-view should be free to watch if you are a Max subscriber. This can also add revenue to Max and getting people to want to subscribe to Max, to AEW fans who want to subscribe to Max, to pay for whatever they choose to pay for Max, whatever the price is for Max. You pay that, you get to watch all AEW pay-per-views for free with a Max subscription. That's how it should be. The fact that even if you have a Max subscription, you still have to pay whatever the discounted price is. It's completely unfair, but it is what it is. I am still very disappointed about that, but it is what it is. This contract deal is a 3-year deal with a 4th year up for option. Last thing I want to say is, I didn't know how to add this into all this, but since last year, AEW's rating numbers have dropped 24%, with the average viewership of being 666,000 people watching AEW. That's across all their shows. That's Dynamite, that's Rampage, and that's Collision. Total number completely. Obviously there needs to be, there's obviously some kind of change that needs to happen. I can't tell you what that change is, because how the fans feel about AEW is very mixed. Some people like the show exactly how it is. Others are not happy with it and can be confused and don't feel like can feel like the stories that are being told half of the time or most of the time are incomplete or told out of turn, I guess. And there are other people that just feel that AEW needs to make some significant changes, because they might feel that AEW might be going down the same road that WCW went down at one time. I personally think there are some things that need to change within AEW. I feel like some of the stories that are being told, especially when you look at factions like the Hurt Syndicate and Death Riders, these are two big factions within AEW, and it's not fair to say how they're doing now, because they're only really just starting to cook, and you have to let it cook, and you have to allow them to have the time they need to really get it up. And they're taking it slow, and for a lot of fans, they don't want to see it taken slow. They want to see results, and they want to see it now. So I can understand how the viewership would drop. I could also see how WWE could also be a factor into the viewership dropping, especially on those certain nights when NXT needs to be on Wednesday night, and how NXT is been dominating those Wednesday nights that they're on because of something that's happening on Tuesday night with the CW, and CW is moving NXT to Wednesday nights for that certain reason, for one night only. You can understand how WWE is doing better these days with NXT on Wednesday night on those certain nights. For an example, there was a Tuesday night, we had the election, so NXT moved to Wednesday night, and the theme for the NXT was taking place in Philadelphia in an ECW arena, and it was a hell of a night. You had some ECW originals pop up, and some get involved in matches, and you have Bubba Ray Dudley in a match with Trick Williams, tag team match against Rich Holland and Ethan Page was awesome. And then to have Devon come out at the end of the match and have Trick Williams put Ethan Page through a table. I mean, the whole match, that whole 2-hour show was incredible, and the ratings and the viewership show that as NXT won that particular Wednesday night. There are multiple things that play into the 20% drop in the average viewership of 666 viewers and how it's been trailing down as of late. And one hopes that Tony Khan is paying attention to the numbers and is not in La La Land, and is going to do something to change all that, especially as we get into 2025 and everything that looks to be pretty freaking sweet for WWE in 2025. But that'll do it. This was my little walkthrough of AEW. Thank you for watching this week's episode of Anthony KT Wrestling, as I dove through a bit of the history of the past and present of AEW and how things look for AEW. It's kind of like it goes up sometimes and it goes down other times. Leave what you think about what's going on in AEW in the comments. Let me know what you think. Don't forget to subscribe. If you haven't yet, don't forget to subscribe. Keep up on when all latest Anthony KT Wrestling episodes drop. Hit that like button. Leave a comment, not only about what you thought about this week's episode, but what you think about AEW as well. I am Anthony KT. This has been Anthony KT Wrestling. Thank you for joining me once again, and I will see you next time. Peace, y'all.